Hi all, welcome to October, middle of October, something like that. Do office hours. So I guess first up, announcements. Probably the most notable announcement is we did make a 4.5.1 release. I'm not sure we've tested all that as much as we would like, but we've made it. Have we flagged it as stable yet? I don't even know, actually. I should know, but I don't know.
And ARM support.
What's going on with 4.5.1? Nope, still pre-release. Okay. Okay, but I think we did upload it to the website, so we should, folks can, as always, please test. I think that's maybe the only announcement. Any other announcements?
I guess Alessandro was mentioning the fact that we are starting to give, let's say, preview releases of ARM binaries, Osquery on ARM.
Or what?
Osquery on ARM, sorry. So we are starting to give preview releases of that.
So I guess we can just sort of jump over to some items. I think if Mike's writing, he's written a few things down that I had already, but that's okay. We'll just have them in two places and then we'll edit them together.
I didn't see.
That's all good. So there's sort of, I have a couple of projects going on that are going really slowly because I'm just having a hard time allocating time around new CI hosts. So this is, broadly speaking, the ARM64 support and the Apple Silicon support. We now have, as mentioned maybe last week or the week before, I have an Apple Silicon box for us sitting on my desk. And I did start trying to run a build for us and just got really bogged down in extensions. So now that we've started with some more docs, I need to revisit that. And the other thing that has been happening is we've been getting questions from external parties who are very interested in us officially supporting Arch64. So, you know, I think roughly people are asking Amazon, and Amazon is asking us. Amazon handed threw an engineer at it, which is why we merged it. Like that merge work came from an Amazon engineer, and I think they've also helped shepherd us through some of the Amazon request for credit stuff. So I think we actually now have suitable credits to run Arch64 machines in Amazon. So that's pretty cool. However, I have not managed to connect that to our CI or really make much progress with that. And I just feel, personally, I feel a little bit overwhelmed by it. I'm just like, where do I even start? So, you know, that and kind of feels like it needs several days of solid focus, and I don't have that right now. So I'd love help. So the state of this is like, we kind of have resources, but they haven't been hooked together. So if anyone's excited to get involved in that, please talk to me after this, during this, whatever.
It seems like that maybe tags in a little bit with the defining AWS infrastructure and code, which I saw mentioned further down in the notes.
A little bit. It's kind of using something like Terraform, I think, is a tool to get where we want to get inside AWS. But some of it also, there's just sort of a straight up research project around like, okay, so if we have these machines, what's the right way to run a CI agent? Is Docker good enough, or do we need to basically burn them down and reboot them with fresh AMIs each time? and maybe Docker is good enough at first, and then we can kind of shift it. So there's like a multi-pronged thing here of, okay, well, what do we want to do? And like, can we kind of cobble it together running in, a tmux session and then sort of inching towards like, how do we do this with a more proper infrastructure as code model? And how do we have reasonable security best practices for kind of what's a pretty serious software project? So there's like this whole multifaceted thing there.
Yeah, I mean, I it sounds like there are a number of good concerns there, and I think.
Hello.
Hello. I think that we are not.
Oh, is it internet?
Do I have it?
Oh, we're not any more sad news right now.
We are.
Is someone? Are other people hearing that? What was I going to say? Oh, we are not currently generating release packages from any of our CI infrastructure. Do I still have that correct?
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess that then to Seth, to your point there, I mean, I think that absolutely we need to be using some security best practices, but we don't necessarily need to have like the most locked down host just to be running tests. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Sorry, there's I'm sharing space with someone, so there's a little conversation in the background. Partly, but I think we don't want to paint ourselves into a corner where we view our Amazon account as irrevocably compromised. So we don't necessarily need to be perfect, but we may be able to be like, okay, the people building this can log in and launch a tmux session, and that's like good enough for initial CI work. But we still sort of probably want to have, actually, we do have reasonable practices around AWS organizational splits, and we need to configure things like, I think CloudWatch is their audit trail, right? So like we should have that sort of thing and not just kind of totally freeform everything, right? So we don't have to be perfect, but I think there's like a minimum bar that I have an intuitive sense for, but I could like sit and rigorously define it, I guess, but I don't know that I could rattle it off the top of my head.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense, and maybe working to document that turn it into a chest and start kicking out his boxes could be helpful.
Yeah, no, that sounds reasonable. The thing I was starting to look at on the Apple Silicon one was whether I can set up an overlay network so that I can give sort of more people access to it, which I think is fine under the Apple EULA on it, given that basically you can grant access for people working under you in the broad project. So there's an Osquery box that I have for us to do Osquery work on. So it seems fine if someone else was like, oh, I want to do some Osquery work on that to do that. The AWS stuff is a different problem there.
Yeah.
Okay, so I will try and maybe put
it's sort of
some
this awkward
thoughts
thing
down
of,
in
like,
some
we're
tickets
dealing
or
with split
something.
tests.
I think in the same vein, we have the macOS endpoint security PR. I think some of where that's blocked is just around working through code signing and profiles. Mike and Charvel spent some time with me. We pushed that a little bit forward, and then I haven't moved forward on it since. So I think the pieces here are figuring out if it's reasonable to add non-core developers to the Apple account,
and I think we totally
which
need to do that.
probably is,
you're working on it,
and
but I think
then
we
doing
also
so.
need people to be.
Can we commit that as what are the reasons not to? I'm looking for a way to forward on that one. And if there's uncertainty, try to nail it down. Because I think it is safe to add a member. But in the near term, we just made a new identifier at the Trail of Bits org to sign as Osquery, but as Trail of Bits, but an Osquery app ID. And we'll just test using that. Since we have the entitlement, we can at least test.
And the reason we need to address this question of whether we can add a non-core developer to the account is because even just testing this locally requires
Provisioning profile and a certificate. Yep.
Yeah.
I see. Okay. And are we able to, as Osquery, create an identifier? Or,
yeah, I think Mike's
separate from the release one.
So it's not necessary to create separate identifiers, but there's already this idea of separate deployment and development provisioning profiles. So with that distinction, you can't sign code that runs off of any machine not explicitly added to the provisioning profile. So you can add a developer, and then their ID and their machine are the only place where that can be run.
I see. I mean, from my perspective, unless there are specific reasons against doing this, I would endorse moving forward.
Any other opinions?
I don't think there are very specific reasons not to. I'm just always nervous about things like this, but I think I'm being overly cautious. So thank you for pushing on me.
Starvel's relatively he's got some trust and built in from his involvement with over the years. Right?
I mean, that's also true, right? Is we're not exactly, it's not exactly an open door, right? We're talking about like adding it to Trail of Bits people or something.
Yeah, they won't have any ability to like hold the door open and invite more people. It really is going to be a one-off. Any individual that needs to be added will be added as needed.
Yeah, I mean, I think this makes sense, and like you said, Charvel's been contributing to this project for years, so that gives me especially little concern, and I'll be happy to make sure that longtime contributors and any contributors are able to do what they need to do.
Okay, I'll try and get on that for reals this time.
The other minor thing is I was blocked on CI. I moved our CI agent to Catalina since we were running on Mojave. That uncovered failing tests on Catalina, which passed on Mojave. So I fixed them. And I think my other PR should be ready to go in a few hours. I also uncovered that Azure is deprecating Xcode versions we use, so I'm moving Xcode versions forward as well. Mike has opened an issue on that as well. So that's a quick update there.
Yeah, fixing those failing tests has been good. So that's the pre-work, sort of technical debt work for the endpoint security PR.
Cool. Probably everything on that stuff. Next up, maybe extensions. I've seen a couple of things come by about extensions, so I sort of grouped them together. One thing around extensions is people seem to have a lot of questions about how to build extensions and run into stuff. And we just got an issue opened on extensions we're maybe building on them is broken, or I don't know if this is a question or what. I haven't triaged it at all. You?
Yeah, the way the extensions are built are really weird. And it is something that we inherited from Osquery 3, where you have to do this weird symbolic link unless you want to use a custom CMake file. In that case, you have to create your own folder and then add another CMake file in there. And then you have to call special things. And it kind of sucks.
How can we make it better?
Yeah. We
So
could try to keep compatibility, maybe.
So yeah, as Alessandro is saying, I believe I haven't looked exactly what the user issue specifically. I mean, I see that he is not able to find the externals target, which should be actually declared by the externals/CMake lists file. So something is not working correctly there.
So I can see the issue. It's globbing. It didn't rerun CMake. Globbing didn't happen, and CMake doesn't know that the external targets is there. That's the issue.
So,
Yeah,
I mean,
in
it's a
general,
different.
they work. No, yeah.
I was going to say it's a different. So I guess one, Alessandro, can you answer on the ticket? And
Yeah.
I guess as the other question, it seems like, if we think our extension building process is highly unusual, what can we replace it? Can we just ship an SDK? What would that look like?
Yes, we can, as long as we keep using the Osquery toolchain. It is possible.
Is there a better way?
I think that a major issue here is that we are currently forced to use the CMake project of Osquery and try to get the extensions to build inside the project. If we could detach it and have a proper SDK, it would be better.
What would it take to do that?
It's probably kind of a bigger factor. I didn't quantify the effort yet, but I'm sure it's not fun right now. And we also have quite a lot of stuff from Buck that we inherited, like the included namespaces that usually wreak havoc, and it's probably additional stuff we would have to port to the SDK. It's just boilerplate.
So if I think about like the Go SDK, or if I think about our SDKs in general, if people want to build extensions that communicate over Thrift, they don't need any of the baggage in the Osquery project. They really just need the Thrift specs. So, like, is it that people are building extension? My recollection is that part of why it comes out of the Osquery source tree is that there's a bunch of helper functions that people want to reuse. And by people, we mostly mean like the core Osquery developers.
That, and probably there's also the code that, well, the code that defines an extension, or the code that defines a plugin, which might be actually external and not like not shipped with the Osquery binary itself. And yeah, helper functions. But I think also something else we talked about in the past was that we wanted to have extensions, well, built with the same toolchain, because they would inherit the same benefits of that toolchain, but also try to avoid a duplication in libraries used between extensions and Osquery itself. Although obviously that's kind of a trade-off, because on one side it's positive because when you have to build both, you only use one version and one copy of the library. But on the other side, if the extension wants to do something special and needs a special version of some of the libraries that Osquery already uses, and I mean third-party libraries like Boost, then the extension cannot do that by itself. where it has to do strange things.
When you say that, it feels like it feels like there are two very different extension authors, hypothetical ones, right? One hypothetical extension author is also a core contributor and is also building Osquery and is just like, oh, great, I have all my Osquery things right here. I'm using the same tool chain. It's really easy. But then there's like another set of people that are probably like, they're not Osquery authors and they're just like, what's the API, right? How do I just link against the thrift file? And they want to build an extension in C++, and they just want to get on with their lives. And I don't see any reason we would even suggest they use the same libraries to build as we do. Is like the API is thrift, so
historically, and I don't know if Nick is there, so he could confirm, but all the issues we have spans from the fact that extensions were meant to be a staging area for whatever we would end up merging in core. And the feature here was being able to copy and paste the code as it is from and to the core to an extensions. And from this, we inherited all the issues of not being able to easily use different versions of libraries. We do not have a clear separation between the SDK and the core and so on.
Yeah, that's largely correct. There might be some other specific nuances there around toolchain build systems that Ted might have better context on. But yeah, that's accurate.
So in short, if we did end up splitting the SDK in the same way that Osquery Go works, we would no longer have these kind of issues.
I mean, I almost wonder if we just want like a clean room implementation of an SDK.
I think on one side, that this has begun cleaning up the core and separating it so that libraries do not depend on each other where they shouldn't, so that then there are a set of core libraries which can be then identified as the SDK and kind of pulled out and maybe compiled together to represent the SDK. I mean, I know he was working toward that, but yeah, I think he has many things on his plate.
I guess the thing I'm circling around, though, is if someone builds a C++ extension, it's not linked in, right? It's still ultimately just communicating over the thrift socket.
Yeah. I was mainly saying that those libraries give you the interface and some helpers that normally you might use. But yeah, probably. I mean, for start, you can also start with much less and just a header, and yeah.
That's kind of where I'm going.
So aren't most C++ extensions just plugging into the registry header, right?
Yeah, they are.
I mean, I don't know if you want to retain anyway this same property, like the fact that that extensions is experimental ground, starting ground for something that can be moved in core. I mean, if we can have like two versions of extensions, not be different, really different, but if you want, you can use the helpers. You have on the side you have a library, which again doesn't depend on a ton of things, which gives you the ability to use some of the Osquery core functionality, and you're not forced to use it. That way, if you believe that extension eventually will go into core or something, you can use that. And while I'm saying I agree, I'm already thinking that it's maybe a bit of a niche case right now, more than people interested in just extending Osquery with additional functionality, not in core. So just saying that I think that there might be options.
I mean, I'm sort of curious, how often does code ever go from extensions to core?
Can anyone think of a single instance of it happening?
We had so I don't know, I didn't follow too much the macOS side of development, but I know that we had extensions to read the new logging implementation, to read from the new logging implementation on macOS. I don't know if we ended up porting these over in core.
No, I don't think we accepted those because those were like shelling out.
Oh yeah, okay. Now I remember some context now. So I think that back then there was no API to do the operation we needed, and think that if we now update the code with the new APIs, we can finally merge it in core and remove the execution.
I think the other question,
I mean, I guess it is fine to remove this let's say feature, and we can also make sure that interface between the core and the extension SDK are similar, so we don't have to change everything and use a completely isolated SDK.
I also kind of wonder a bit. I got like one other thing I wonder is, it feels like we're tying ourselves into knots for a very narrow use case that I'm not sure saves us much. Like when I think about, whenever I refactor code in Go or whatnot and move it around, like frequently all the helper names change and there's all these minor changes, but like the hard part was coming up with the central logic of it. And like, that doesn't have to change. I just have to change all the helpers.
Yeah. But yeah, again, as Stefano mentioned, the only real problem of having a completely split SDK is that people will have to worry about having reproducible builds and being able to build once and ship everywhere. This is something we have already taken care of, and most of the time, user can just they pretty much have everything. They have both core OpenSSL, and they can reuse everything, not worry about distribution, and just worry about the logic. If we split everything, unless we also take care of that step, extension developers will have a hard time.
I guess another question though is like, who's developing extensions and how many of them are trying to ship to cross-platform versus like shipping some internal company logic or something? And I don't know.
I know there's quite a bit of extension development that still exists in the world. Like that is like generically, as a generic statement. As far as like shipping it externally, I don't think that's very common. I don't think it happens a huge amount, at least. But along the note of like SDK, a separate SDK, we did take huge amounts of pains to make sure that we were never in the situation of having to ask the question of what build are you using. So like in Slack, we would optimize a lot for making Slack triage easy for us. So the only question we'd ever need to ask is like, what version of Osquery are you using? It wasn't, what version of Osquery are you using? What version of the SDK are you using? Are there any extra components of the SDK? Do you have other options? Like, we wanted it to be very, very easy to figure out, very specifically where the problem would be. So most of the decisions we made so many years ago probably aren't relevant anymore, right? Like the whole thing about like, it'd be cool if we could have the development of a table happen in an extension first for you to test it and then lift that extension code and drop it into core. I don't know if I've ever seen that happen. Like I maybe once or twice, but it was rare, if ever. Typically people will just make the table and see if it's useful. And then if it's useful, we just ship it, right? There's so many things we did in theory that like never really came to fruition. So like, I don't think it's
I don't think we necessarily need to put caution on the way things are. We did it for reasons that I don't think have ever really come to fruition. So,
I mean, given all of that, if it's going to make folks' lives easier to not maintain those things, I'd be fine with saying
yeah.
it might take a little bit more work to bring something into core. Because it sounds like it's pretty clear it's not paying off as it is.
Yeah.
In fairness, I think the biggest reason to keep status quo is because I'm not sure anyone wants to go through the work of shipping a bare SDK. But it also sounds like we might be interested if someone did pick that up.
Yeah, agreed on that point.
Well, we are kind of already are, although it's hidden and depends on other things inside Osquery itself. So it shouldn't be technically something more to do. Well, beyond bringing the current code to that state. Also, I was thinking, well, obviously my main language is C++, so I'm biased, but I think that if someone needs cross-platform and effectively, maybe I'm not sure they will choose necessarily C++, and if they choose C++, because for other reason, performance mainly. Yeah, I mean, they can look at the Osquery project, so they have some example there to try to do the same thing. But I think in most of the cases, they will maybe use another language like Python or Go, things like that. And I mean, we have talked also about in the past about maybe separating the whole third-party library part CMake code. It is still a lot. That in that case, that might be additional work to do. But with that, you could have that part be used by extensions that wants to inherit the same benefits, although
I kind of feel like anyone who's trying to write a C++ extension probably has a story for how they run builds in C++ already. It just feels like a hard language to pick up if you're going to write something the first time.
yeah.
Next on our extension list, there was some Slack conversation about writable extensions, and writable extensions might not work yet, or maybe worked. I guess they must have worked, but now it must be broken. And Stefano, you were thinking that this was the way columns were getting passed.
Yeah, it's completely wild guess, just because it seems to be connected with constraints. So as soon as you pass a where clause, it seems to break, otherwise not. So I was thinking the only thing we have changed is that, and also checking for required columns. So yeah, we might have to look at that.
If it was the constraint thing, then no. Well, I thought we set all columns were passed to all extensions all the time. But maybe there's a bug there. Well, we should probably just open a ticket, and we can debug in the issue. Someone with more knowledge want to open an issue?
Yeah, I'll open it.
Great, thank you. If you send it to me, I'll make sure it gets linked into the minutes. Teddy tossed out a suggestion in Slack, and then bailed on our meeting today. But I wanted to raise it because I think it's a great thing to start talking about, which is sort of how do we accept new contributors, and not new contributors, new people with commit access. Because right now, commit access is primarily the TSC and then a bunch of legacy Facebook people. And I think we should accept more people. And this kind of raises this question of like, what criteria do we use? And Teddy threw out things like, is there a track record of accepted PRs or of good reviews? And I sort of want to say we should have some kind of low-key nomination process, and beyond that, like, I don't know. So it's kind of open floor for discussion on that.
When you say nomination, it makes me think that someone else would have to do it. I think it would make sense that you could self-nominate at the least.
I support self-nominations.
Yeah, I think it's a little tricky. I think I think that we've talked about a lot of sort of procedural things like this and hesitated to define formal requirements and kind of just gone with what people are, what feels right for folks within the project. And so far, we haven't run into any issues with that I've noticed. So I'd lean towards maybe doing similar with this issue, and saying maybe folks can self-nominate for that access, or it can be offered to them, and then maybe just put it up to the steering committee if anyone has concerns, and trying to accept anyone who's has some sort of track record of good contributions to the project.
So to rephrase that, so I'm probably the one most in favor of words like process, right? But I think that I probably agree with you in theory, and I would translate that to something like the process to become a contributor is either to have someone nominate you or nominate yourself, and the TSC will basically chat and thumbs up, thumbs down it, right? It's and that things that go into that are general participation, code, whatever. We don't need like a formal bot-driven process. I feel like I want something where it's like, this is how we make this decision, right? And it might be like, the TSC talks about it. It gets a little funny. I don't know. We probably want to have a meeting to talk about it because it doesn't feel like we should talk about it in office hours because it's about people, but like maybe I'm wrong. And we don't have meetings outside of office hours, but we can work through that, I guess. So I would totally be down for a really low-key process, like someone puts your name forward, even yourself, and the TSC talks about it and comes to a conclusion.
To me, that sounds like sufficient process, and perhaps, ideally, such conversations could happen in the open so that if there are concerns, it's very clear and open what the concerns are. And maybe it could just be like a thread in the core channel, or maybe we need like a TSC channel or something like that. But overall, I'm on board with your proposal there, Steph.
I don't know if, GitHub issue, Slack, unanimous, majority. Those are questions I think we'd have to, I don't feel like we need to like have a really formal, let's modify our constitution to come up with the thing. I just think we have to define ahead of time what we want.
Question before we go ahead. How many people are right now clicking the merge button? Not
it's
many
mostly
of
me
us
and Teddy.
have. Yeah, but I think the biggest issue is that we lack code reviewers, and that the commit access is really not that much important as long as people can manage issues, approve or reject pull requests, and so on.
Yeah, I think Alessandro is right. To add to that, though, it will be also interesting if it is possible to give the permission to access the GitHub actions or checks, the old checks, which would permit restarting, for instance, the CI from the GitHub UI. Because often yeah, if a user opens his PR and there's some malfunctioning on the CI, or I don't know, it happens that one needs to restart it. I mean, sure, he can close and reopen the PR, but that restarts everything. It's a minor thing maybe, but just since we have that UI, having access to it will be useful, I think. More people can help general managing of reviews and PRs, basically.
I think, speaking for myself, and I'm curious what the sense of some of the other people are, I think people are more likely to do code review if they have commit access, because they feel more invested. I certainly do, right? If I'm recognized as having commit access, there's more of a benefit to me. There's more motivation for me to actually go and review code. I don't know how other people feel, but
I mean, it makes sense, but is there a way to provide access without? Because yeah, I mean, the biggest issue with commit access is that first we have this kind of unspoken rule between all of us that prevents anyone from, just merging stuff. Even the stuff that I do, I never approve it. The pull requests that are approved, we always wait for someone that has the domain knowledge to actually merge. And additional things that are useful is once you have commit access, you can also access secrets. And since the GitHub permission system is useless, there's not much you can do to enforce rules, except trying to, do weird stuff like, I don't know, requiring 6 positive reviews for a pull request to get merged. There is really no way to actually enforce things. Once you give a person commit access, it's over.
We can do some of that with code owners if we wanted to.
Yeah, we can reclaim some of these permissions with code owners, but is it enough?
I'm also not sure. If I thought about it right now, there are maybe 2 people who I would float for nomination into a committers group, and I'm just not sure there are all that many of them. So I don't know. I agree with your concerns, but I'm also not sure. If I think about the people who I might nominate, I'm just not sure it's realistic yet.
Yeah, and on the requirements, we should at least write down some rules like good security practices, technical stuff, right? So things like two-factor authentication and so on. And maybe some contacts. Meaning you know me by my real name, my employer. If tomorrow I do something bad, you have a way to, so look, Alessandro is bad. Remove commit access and do something about it. So one thing I wouldn't do is giving commit access to a username that doesn't have, that you don't know like real name and things like that. What kind of access does Mike has? Because he can pretty much manage.
We granted Mike commit access because we didn't have the ability to grant him triage access, and we know who Mike is and we trust him.
Yeah.
Although I did accidentally push a branch last month, but it was taken care of quickly. And
I've done that too, Mike.
Yeah, it wasn't.
I've done that too.
One other thing is like maybe there could be some kind of like a short boot camp, like here's what you're expected to do and here's what you're not expected to do. Like, with power comes responsibility kind of statement.
I think if you're going to add someone, they're probably going to be a known quantity. Like you're going to have worked with them already for a while. I don't know if they'll need training, but I think codifying expectations and rules is not a bad idea.
I like the idea of boot camps, especially because it's hard to get people involved. So anything like a boot camp that helps get people involved seems like a great idea. Yeah, I don't think there's any obvious takeaways here, but I think it's a good thing to brainstorm about.
It would be nice to find a way to, coordinate things like Hacktober to actually get people to, start developing things and get some help from the community.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think I wrote all those things down. Does anyone have anything else they want to raise? Okay, then I think we all get 8 minutes back.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone.
Thank
you all. Guess
Thank you, everyone.
Footnote I'll toss out there. No, never mind. Not ready to toss out that footnote. Sorry. Thank you all.
Thank you, Seth. Bye.
All right.
Bye.